Welcome, everyone. We're diving deep today into work culture with Cate Sevilla's book, How to Work Without Losing Your Mind, a hilarious and insightful guide for surviving the modern workplace and dodging that dreaded burnout.
Yeah, what really grabbed me about Sevilla's book is how, honestly, she gets into all those messy office realities that no one really wants to talk about, you
Right.
know? It's a fresh take, and anyone who's ever felt kind of lost or overwhelmed by their job will relate to it.
Oh, totally. Like she talks about crying in the office bathroom and surviving passive-aggressive post-it note wars, which we've all seen, I'm sure.
Sure.
She even gets into those office romances gone wrong. It's so relatable. It makes you realize hey, I'm not the only one who's dealt with this craziness.
Absolutely. And the best part is beyond the funny story, she actually gives you practical strategies to handle these situations.
Right.
It's advice straight from her own experience, so it's super actionable.
So let's start with a topic I think a lot of us have experienced: bad bosses. Sevilla kicks things off with her own run-in, with a micromanaging boss who left her a passive-aggressive post-it note during a meeting, questioning why she even had her laptop there.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic power move, right?
Hmm.
It's subtle, but it's basically a superior trying to undermine and control their employee. Those seemingly small things can create a super toxic environment and just chip away at your confidence.
Totally. And Sevilla doesn't stop there. She looks at all sorts of bad bosses, from the ones who do microaggressions to straight-up bullies.
Yeah.
The story about Marianne, the teacher who was labeled hyper-aggressive for speaking up, is a really good example.
It is. It shows how these unspoken cultural dynamics, especially around women and people from different backgrounds, can play out. We really need to recognize and deal with these subtle forms of bias.
Right. Sevilla's advice is to choose courage over discomfort and discomfort over resentment. She wants us to have those hard conversations with our higher-ups, to set boundaries and fight for what we need.
And, that ties into all the research on psychological safety, which basically says when people feel safe to speak their mind, challenge ideas, and even mess up without being punished, they're way more engaged, productive, and innovative.
Makes sense. But how do we actually have these tough conversations without, totally losing it?
Well, Sevilla suggests some practical things like trying to give people the benefit of the doubt, not making assumptions, and really focusing on solutions.
So it's more about being curious and understanding that we might not have the whole picture right.
Exactly. And even taking a pause before responding, especially when things get heated, can save you from saying something you regret.
It's like hitting that pause button in your head, right?
Yeah,
Like waiting a day before sending that angry email. It gives you time to craft a response that's assertive but still respectful.
for sure. And Sevilla even talks about the importance of really listening even in stressful meetings. Like actually trying to understand what the other person is saying without letting your own anxieties take over the conversation.
I know it's so easy to get caught up in your own head, especially when you're nervous. But mindful listening helps you really engage and avoid those miscommunications that can just derail everything.
Totally. And another thing Sevilla highlights is being clear about your work schedule and boundaries, especially with all the remote and flexible work these days.
Right, like blocking out time for lunch, even if it's just a quick break from your desk.
Ah.
And saving the word urgent for things that are actually urgent.
Yeah, it's all about training yourself and your colleagues to respect boundaries and cut down on unnecessary stress.
Because if you're constantly in crisis mode, how can you even tell what's a real priority and what can wait?
Exactly. Clear expectations and boundaries help you prioritize effectively and have a healthier work-life balance.
Now let's get to a topic that can be a bit awkward:
Yeah,
office romances. You know those situations that can lead to some messy breakups.
definitely. Sevilla's advice is to really think about the potential consequences, both professionally and personally, before diving into anything.
It's like that old saying, don't dip your pen in the company ink. But Sevilla goes beyond just the warnings. She gives tips on how to be a good communicator at work in general.
Like how to write professional emails, schedule meetings efficiently, and just streamline things to avoid those endless back and forths.
I love her tip about taking charge when scheduling meetings. Providing options, booking rooms, and including all the important details so people can just confirm. It takes the guesswork out and reduces stress for everyone.
Right. It shows professionalism and respect for everyone's time just by being thoughtful with your communication.
Exactly. Now let's switch gears to leadership and responsibility.
Yeah, Sevilla challenges that idea that being a manager is the ultimate goal. She says it's less about power and more about taking on a whole new set of challenges and duties.
So it's not all it's cracked up to be.
Right. Good managers are okay with being uncomfortable. They're willing to have tough conversations, give constructive feedback, and make difficult decisions even when they're not popular.
I guess that makes sense. So what makes a good manager then?
Well, one crucial thing is creating a psychologically safe environment for their team. They encourage open communication, value different perspectives, and recognize that mistakes are part of learning.
So it's more about fostering a culture of continuous learning and curiosity rather than fear and blame.
Exactly. And Savi doesn't shy away from the fact that managers have to make tough choices sometimes, like letting people go.
Ugh, it's got to be hard.
She stresses the importance of handling those situations ethically, legally, and with compassion. It's about recognizing the impact on the individual while also considering what's best for the organization.
It sounds like a really delicate balancing act.
It is. She says it's one of the toughest parts of leadership, but sometimes letting someone go, even though it's painful, is the best thing for both sides.
So it's about acknowledging that not every fit is perfect and that parting ways can sometimes open up opportunities for growth and new beginnings for everyone involved.
Right. And another important topic Sevilla tackles is parenthood and how the patriarchy plays out in the workplace. She talks about things like maternity discrimination, the mental load on working mothers, and the lack of affordable childcare options.
It's crazy how these issues are still so prevalent.
It's a systemic problem, and she highlights the need for changes like on-site childcare and flexible work arrangements to better support working parents.
Absolutely. And she also encourages more empathy and understanding between parents and non-parents at work, recognizing that everyone has different needs and priorities.
Yeah, it's about creating a workplace that values and supports all employees, whether they have kids or not. One story that really stuck with me was about Helen Larkin, who was laid off from a beauty company while 8 months pregnant.
Wow, that's just awful. But at least she took legal action and won right.
She did, but her experience highlights the discrimination that many working mothers still face.
It makes you wonder how far we've really come.
And it's not just about the obvious stuff either. We need to talk about the invisible mental load that working mothers carry.
I know it's a lot to juggle.
Maddie Armitage, a chief data and product officer, says many women have already worked 2 hours before they even get to the office.
Just from managing everything at home.
Exactly. It's that constant juggling of childcare, housework, and emotional labor that can leave working mothers feeling completely drained.
So it's like having two full-time jobs. But despite all these challenges, Sevilla does offer some hope, right?
Yeah, she shares some positive examples like Bumble, whose CEO expanded parental leave and childcare benefits after becoming a mom herself.
That's encouraging.
It shows that change is possible and that more companies are starting to see the value in supporting working parents.
But let's not forget about the tough topic of job loss and how to recover from it. Sevilla gives some really practical advice for dealing with the emotional roller coaster and navigating the whole job search process.
Yeah, she stresses the importance of giving yourself time to heal, establishing a routine, and not rushing into a new job just because you're panicking.
It's about recognizing that losing a job is a grieving process and allowing yourself to work through those emotions.
Exactly. She reminds us that our job doesn't define us, and that sometimes getting laid off can be an opportunity for growth, reflection, and new beginnings.
It's like finding the silver lining in a really tough situation.
And when you're ready to get back out there, Sevilla gives strategies for finding a job that actually aligns with your values and goals.
So it's not just about taking the first offer that comes along.
Right. She emphasizes doing your research, asking the right questions during interviews, and most importantly, trusting your gut.
So if something feels off, like the company culture or the vibe you get from a potential manager, it's important to pay attention to those red flags.
Absolutely. She even provides a list of insightful interview questions to help you figure out what a company is really like and if it's the right fit for you.
That's so helpful. What are some of the questions she suggests?
Well, Cheryl Ferguson, a VP of talent, recommends asking things that reveal the company's values and culture, like how does your company promote work-life balance? Or can you describe your approach to professional development?
Those are good ones. It's about getting a sense of what it would actually be like to work there day to day.
Exactly. And Maddie Armitage reminds us that it's a two-way street. We're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing us. It's about finding a mutually beneficial partnership where our skills and values align with the company's mission and culture.
It makes sense to think of it that way. And speaking of finding the right fit, let's talk about the often dreaded topic of salary negotiation.
Yeah, that can be a tricky one for a lot of people. But Sevilla gives some practical tips for approaching it authentically and effectively without resorting to overly aggressive tactics that can backfire.
So it's not about playing hardball.
Right. She encourages us to do our research, understand the market rate for our skills and experience, and present our case clearly and confidently.
And to remember that it's a conversation, not a battle.
Exactly. It's about finding a solution that works for both sides, one that reflects our value and fits within the company's budget. Sevilla also cautions against using overly formal language or legal jargon. She advocates for a more natural and genuine approach that reflects who you are.
So be yourself, but know your worth.
Exactly. Ultimately, it's about recognizing your value, advocating for yourself while maintaining professionalism and respect. And before we wrap up this part of our discussion, I want to highlight a point that really resonated with me: embracing imperfection and prioritizing well being.
I love that. It's such an important message, especially in today's high-pressure work environment.
Sevilla encourages us to be kind to ourselves, to recognize that perfection is unattainable, and to focus on learning from our mistakes rather than dwelling on them.
It's about shifting our mindset from self-criticism to self-compassion and growth.
Exactly. She reminds us that our well being should always come first, that work should enhance our lives, not consume them.
It's about finding that balance between pursuing our professional goals and taking care of our physical, emotional, and mental health.
Right. It's about creating a sustainable work rhythm that allows us to thrive, not just survive. It's like navigating a minefield out there sometimes, just waiting for something to explode.
Right. Some days it feels like I'm juggling flaming torches while riding a unicycle on a tightrope.
Wow. That's a pretty intense image. But
Yeah.
yeah, I get it. Work-life balance can be tough. Sevilla talks a lot about the importance of self-awareness in this whole thing. Understanding your strengths, weaknesses, what pushes your buttons, it can really help you navigate those workplace challenges.
So it's like having that internal compass to guide you through the rough waters. Speaking of rough waters, let's talk about something a lot of women face: competition and envy, especially in those cutthroat corporate environments.
Ugh. Yeah, Sevilla doesn't sugarcoat that at all. She totally debunks that myth of automatic female solidarity at work. She even shares her own story about having a business idea stolen by a female colleague.
Oof, that's gotta sting. It's like a reminder that even in spaces designed to empower women, those power dynamics and insecurities can still creep in. But she doesn't just dwell on the negativity, right? She gives advice for managing envy, both as the envious person and the one being envied.
Right. Like therapist Kate Hogan suggests approaching those situations with empathy and curiosity. Check in with the person, see how they're doing, instead of just assuming it's jealousy.
So it's about separating our own insecurities and projections from the situation.
Exactly. And author Viv Groskop reminds us that everyone's got their own struggles. Comparison really is the thief of joy. It's so much better to focus on your own path and celebrate your own achievements rather than getting caught up in keeping up with the Joneses.
So true. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about burnout, which seems to be especially prevalent among millennials with all this hustle culture pressure.
Yeah, Sevilla dives into this whole phenomenon and even references Anne Helen Peterson's article, How Millennials Became the Burnout Generation. Peterson basically argues that this constant pressure to work, produce, optimize every aspect of life is leaving people feeling exhausted and disillusioned.
It's like running a marathon with no finish line in sight.
Totally. And Lisa Miller, in her piece, The Ambition Collision, talks about that feeling of hitting a plateau and questioning the whole point of striving so hard. It's like you've climbed the ladder only to realize it's leaning against the wrong wall.
Ouch, yeah, I've been there. But Sevilla goes deeper and connects this burnout epidemic to our childhood experiences, suggesting that our work ethic and need for validation often stem from these deep-seated insecurities.
Interesting. So it's like we're trying to prove something to ourselves or to others.
Right. She shares a story about Kira, who achieved her childhood dream job but ended up having a breakdown in the process. It shows that even getting what we think we've always wanted doesn't guarantee happiness or fulfillment.
It's a good reminder that we need to make sure our work aligns with our values and that we find purpose beyond external validation or societal expectations. So what does Sevilla suggest we do about this burnout epidemic?
Well, she doesn't just leave us hanging. She gives us a framework for preventing and combating burnout with 4 key areas: managing our energy, maintaining baseline wellness, setting strong boundaries, and being mindful about how we communicate.
So it's a holistic approach.
Exactly.
Mhm.
First off, she emphasizes that our energy is a limited resource, just like money. We need to replenish it. She points to the Energy Project framework, which encourages us to look at our energy through 4 lenses: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual.
Makes sense. So it's about prioritizing activities that recharge us and minimizing those that drain us, whether it's getting enough sleep, connecting with loved ones, or doing hobbies that bring us joy.
Right. And then there's setting boundaries both at work and in our personal lives. Thaddeus stresses this, especially in those family-like workplaces where it can be hard to separate work from personal life.
It's easy to get caught up in that always-on mentality. But even in the most well-intentioned workplaces, boundaries are crucial to prevent burnout and maintain that healthy separation. And what about mindful communication?
Well, it's about being intentional with our communication, respecting everyone's time, and minimizing those digital distractions that can zap our productivity and stress us out. So things like managing our inbox, effectively being strategic about scheduling meetings, and navigating the world of video calls in a way that doesn't drain us.
It sounds like it's all about being more deliberate with our communication and recognizing that our time and energy are valuable. Now, let's not forget about Sevilla's emphasis on embracing imperfection and prioritizing well-being, which kind of ties everything together.
I love that part. She's all about being kind to ourselves, acknowledging that we're all works in progress, learning from our mistakes instead of beating ourselves up over them.
It's about shifting from self-criticism to self-compassion and growth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she reminds us that self-care isn't selfish. It's essential. Taking care of our physical, emotional, and mental health allows us to show up as our best selves, both at work and in life.
It's about finding that sweet spot where we can pursue our professional goals without sacrificing our well-being. So it's not just about surviving work, but actually thriving.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that work is just one part of our multifaceted lives, and that our worth goes beyond our job titles and salaries.
It's about finding that intersection where our professional ambitions align with our values and priorities, creating a fulfilling and sustainable life.
I love that. Now, before we move on to job loss and rebuilding, I want to touch on something else Sevilla talks about, resilience.
Ah, yes, that's so important. It's about building those coping mechanisms and support networks that can help us weather the inevitable storms of work and life.
She encourages us to see challenges as opportunities for growth, to learn from our mistakes, and come out stronger and wiser on the other side.
It's about developing that inner strength and adaptability that allows us to bounce back from setbacks.
Exactly. Now let's dive into Sevilla's advice on navigating job loss and the whole rebuilding process.
Okay. She gives some really practical guidance for dealing with the emotional fallout and navigating the daunting task of finding a new job.
It can feel like a really overwhelming process.
For sure. But she emphasizes the importance of giving yourself time to heal, establishing a routine, and not rushing into a new job just out of panic or fear.
So it's about acknowledging that losing a job is a grieving process and allowing yourself the space to process those emotions.
Exactly. And she reminds us that losing a job doesn't define us, and that often it can be an opportunity for growth reflection and new beginnings.
It's about finding that silver lining, even when things feel really tough.
And when you are ready to start looking for a new job, Sevilla offers strategies for finding one that truly aligns with your values and aspirations.
So it's not just about taking the first offer that comes along.
Right. She emphasizes doing your research, asking the right questions during interviews, and most importantly, trusting your gut.
So if something feels off, like the company culture or the vibe you get from a potential manager, it's important to pay attention to those red flags.
Absolutely. She even gives you a list of insightful interview questions to help you uncover what a company is really like and see if it's the right fit for you.
That's super helpful. What are some of the questions she suggests?
Well, Cheryl Ferguson, a VP of Talent, recommends asking questions that reveal a company's values and culture, like, how does your company promote work-life balance? Or, can you describe your approach to professional development?
Those are good ones. It's about getting a feel for what it would actually be like to work there day to day.
Exactly. And Maddie Armitage reminds us that it's a two-way street. We're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing us. The goal is to find a mutually beneficial partnership where our skills and values match up with the company's mission and culture.
That's a great way to think about it. And of course, we can't forget about the dreaded salary negotiation.
Right. That's often the most nerve-wracking part. But Sevilla gives some practical tips for approaching it authentically and effectively without resorting to those aggressive tactics that can backfire.
So it's not about playing hardball.
Exactly. She encourages us to do our research, know the market rate for our skills and experience, and present our case with confidence and clarity.
And to remember that it's a conversation, not a battle.
Right. It's about finding a solution that works for both sides, one that reflects our value and fits within the company's budget. Sevilla also cautions against using overly formal language or legal jargon. She's all about being genuine and letting your personality shine through.
So be yourself, but know your worth.
Exactly. It's about understanding your value, advocating for yourself while still being professional and respectful.
Hmm.
Okay, so before we wrap up this part, I think it's time to synthesize all of Sevilla's wisdom into a handy 10-point guide for navigating the modern workplace.
Ooh, I love this idea. It's like a pocket-sized survival guide for staying sane amidst the chaos of work life.
Exactly. So, are you ready to dive into our top 10 tips?
Absolutely, let's do it. All right, let's
Oh.
get to it. What's the first gem of wisdom in our survival guide?
Number 1, choose courage over discomfort when you're dealing with workplace issues. Don't let those anxieties bottle up and turn into resentment. Have those tough conversations, even if they make you a little squeamish.
Solid advice. What's next?
Number 2, remember that female solidarity is a choice, not an obligation. Support your fellow women when you can, but realize that not every workplace relationship will blossom into a full-blown sisterhood.
Makes sense. What else you got?
Okay, number 3. Burnout, it's a cultural thing, not a personal failing. Understand those bigger forces that contribute to this whole epidemic and prioritize self-care and boundaries.
Love it. What's number 4?
Your energy is a finite resource. Treat it like it is. Figure out what activities energize you versus what drains you and plan your schedule accordingly. That's number 4.
All right, number 5. Hit me.
That family vibe at work can be a double-edged sword. Make sure you're setting boundaries to keep things healthy between your work life and your personal life.
Boundaries are key for sure. What about number 6?
Good managers, they're okay with being uncomfortable. They're willing to have those tough conversations, give constructive criticism, and make difficult decisions, all while being empathetic and clear. That's number 6.
That's a good one. What's next?
Number 7, being a parent doesn't make you less ambitious or less capable. Speak up for policies and practices that support working parents and challenge those old school assumptions about moms in the workplace.
Absolutely. All right, number 8. Lay it on me.
Job loss. See it as a chance for growth and a new direction. Use that time to reflect on what matters to you. Explore some new paths and chart a course that aligns with your goals.
Okay, number 9.
Trust your gut when you're interviewing for a new job. Watch out for red flags, ask those insightful questions, and choose a workplace where you feel valued and respected.
Couldn't agree more. And finally, what's our 10th and final tip for surviving the modern workplace?
Prioritize your well-being. Remember, work should make your life better, not consume it. Make time for things that bring you joy, nurture those relationships, and invest in your physical and mental health.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. We've covered a lot of ground today exploring Cate Sevilla's How to Work Without Losing Your Mind. But before we sign off, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question from the book. What would you do if you weren't afraid? It's a powerful question that challenges us to confront those limiting beliefs and self-doubts that can hold us back from achieving our full potential.
So as you navigate the ups and downs of your work life, remember to be courageous, prioritize your well-being, and never be afraid to speak up for what you need and what you deserve.
And remember, you're not alone in this. We're all in this together, figuring it out one step at a time. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, may your work be fulfilling and your Post-it note battles epic, yet always professional.